Hi, Mohammed.
Hi, Sabine. Good evening.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. So let me start sharing my screen. Do you have any topics you would like to go over?
Not really. I missed a few meetings. I just want to catch up what's going on with Elsa today.
Okay, great. So I just have two topics, which has to do with what I've been working on this week. The week before this week, I've been mostly working on the dashboard application. I recorded that session, and it's on there if you want to take a look. So for this session, I was thinking maybe to discuss what I've been working on for the past week, which is in preparation for my upcoming talk on Orchard Harvest. For those who don't know, Orchard Harvest is a conference organized by the Orchard community. And for those who don't know what Orchard is, let's take a look. It's an open source application framework. Let's see if they have a description here. Well, they have a list of features, and they mention media management to manage media types. They have multilingual support. It's a modular framework, multi-tenant. It has security, and it has workflows. And this is the reason actually why I'm doing a talk at the Orchard Harvest Conference, which by the way is next week on Wednesday. My talk will be, I think it was 8 p.m. UTC. And the reason for the talk is that Elsa has its roots in Orchard Core. So Orchard Core has this workflows module, and I basically took that code and made it in turn it into a reusable class library that has no dependencies on Orchard, so that you could use it in other applications without also having to have a dependency on the rest of Orchard Core, which is a pretty vast framework. It has a lot of stuff in it. You may not always want to use that. Have you ever heard of it, Mohammed?
Yes, I think because I started with Elsa 1, and I think that was heavily inspired or directly ported maybe from Orchard.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I came to know about Elsa from Elsa 1 times, and I remember that you mentioned that description as well, that it is coming directly or inspired from here.
That's right. Yeah, indeed. Elsa 1 was a direct port in terms of the underlying workflow engine, the runner, that logic, and even the designer in terms of UI. It was using the same library, which is JS
Yeah,
Plumb, and yeah, it was a direct copy. The main difference at that point, I think, was the the UI was implemented as a SPA using Stencil. I think already at that point, and of course the workflow designer in Orchard, it's using JS Plumb and jQuery, and it uses not it's not implemented as a SPA. And actually that this is what I wanted to do during this session as well, is just give a little bit of a demo of Orchard Core, what it looks like, what you can do with it, and also take a look at the workflows module, which I think might be interesting. Before we go there, let me link in case people want to attend the Orchard Harvest Conference. It's free, it's online, so you can register for free. It's as I mentioned, it's online. It happens on Teams. So if you want, you can. I'll include the link in the description. These are the speakers, including myself here. This is the program. So we start with a keynote from Sebastian. He's a core contributor, and for the past more than 10 years, probably already, he's the main developer of Orchard, starting with Orchard 1. And Orchard 2 is we never call it Orchard 2, we call it Orchard Core, because it's a re-implementation from original Orchard of the pre-ASP.NET Core timeframe that was ported to using ASP.NET Core, hence the name Orchard Core. And then we have multi-tenancy, a talk about multi-tenancy using Orchard Framework, QA automation by, sorry, I'm blanking on his name, but it's such a, I know him, well, I used to know him very well. I met him in person. His name is Zoltan. He's a great guy. He's very smart, and he's the founder of or the co-founder of Lombik, and they specialize in Orchard consultancy. and they are big contributors to the Orchard Core project. So here's a talk about a real-world implementation of Orchard Core. It's going to be interesting. Some breakout sessions in the afternoon, and then localization and an e-commerce module. And this, my understanding is that the Orchard Core Commerce module is it's mentioned here. It's the spiritual successor to Noisette Commerce, and Noisette is a brand name created by another core contributor of Orchard back in the days. He's now a program manager at Microsoft. His name is Bertrand Leroy. I hope he'll be attending as well. That would be fun to see him there as well, but we will see. And then my talk as the last one about Elsa workflows. And my plan is to talk a little bit about the history of Elsa, where it came from, and then describe a little bit what it would take, what it takes to take the Orchard Core workflows module and make it, reusable and standalone. And then look a little bit at the comparison, so the similarities between Orchard Core workflows and Elsa workflows, but also the differences. Yeah, that's basically my talk. So yeah, if you're interested, you're welcome to join. It will be next week on Wednesday at 8:05 p.m. UTC. So let's take a look at Orchard Core itself. So they have documentation, they have a forum. Here you can download this version, the latest version, and the source code is on GitHub. And they have also a weekly podcast that, which is the weekly community meeting, which happens on Tuesday, which is also free for anyone to join. Also happens on Teams. Yeah, let's just get it running. I already have it open in Writer. And what I have here in Writer, just to walk you through it quickly, is just a regular ASP.NET Core project. So there's nothing much to it. It's just an ASP.NET Core project created using the empty template. So it gives you just app settings and a program CS file. And this is what it looks like to start using Orchard Core. Of course, you need to reference some of the packages. So they have an application CMS targets package, which is like a bundle package that brings in some of the other necessary dependencies. I'm using a custom logging implementation using Serilog and a custom module. So Orchard Core, it's a modular framework, and the idea is to extend its functionalities. You create modules yourself. So a module is typically just a class library or maybe a Razor class library. I don't know actually. I think this one is, yeah, it's a Razor class library. But we'll look into this a little later. Yeah, so the only package you need for Orchard is this one, which brings in CMS capabilities as well. And then to use it, you just say add Orchard CMS. This is optional. I don't think you need setup features. I don't think you need auto setup, which I think I haven't tried it, but from what I've understood from the forums is if you wanted to automate Orchard setup using some build pipeline maybe, or just some scripting, you need this one. It's here. I copied it in from documentation. Then you build a web application and you start the Orchard Core middleware pipeline. So very simple to look at, for minimum setup of Orchard. So with that in place, I already started the solution, so I should be able to just click on this link. And the first thing we'll see is a setup screen. So this comes from I think the setup module in Orchard. And what it will do, it will create a default tenant. So Orchard is multi-tenant, and by default, it will create a default tenant, which I think they call shell. So here, let's say Orchard demo. They have this notion of recipes, which is very powerful because it allows you to basically take an entire configuration of an Orchard installation and put it in a file called a recipe, which is a JSON formatted file. And it allows you to, pre-configure a site. Let's say you're creating a product portfolio website or an e-commerce website, doesn't matter, or a blog website, and you have it configured in a certain way. You can export it as a recipe, make adjustments as you need, and then reuse it. So if you want to then replicate that website but with different databases, because you want to create different blog posts or create other content, you don't have to recreate the configuration yourself. You can just use this recipe. So here we could use maybe the blog recipe. Then we can specify the database provider. So their ORM is YesSQL, which is like a NoSQL database, but implemented using SQL or relational databases using a library called YesSQL, which is also created by Sebastian, this guy. He's a developer at Microsoft, and he's the benevolent dictator of Orchard Core. All right, so for username, do admin. All right, that didn't work. Let me try again. All right, so setup is completed. We now have a basic blog website. So we have a home page, that's this one, and we have an about page. All right, so let's go to the back end. That's always admin. All right, so here we are in the back end. So let's explore a little bit. They have dark mode. First thing we see is a thing called blog. So this is like this is a list of all of your blog posts within a blog. And one of the most powerful features of Orchard is its capability to construct content types from building blocks called content parts. So almost every bit of content in Orchard is a content item that has a content type, which is similar to, let's say, a class. If you have a class, that will be a content type, and then a content item would be an instance of that class. So here we have content types are called article, blog, etc. But they are composed of content parts. So if we look at the content type definitions, we take a look at, let's say, well, page, for example. We'll edit this one. So it has the title part, an auto route part, a flow part, and a page part. And the page part, I think, is an implicit part that is it's used as a placeholder for adding fields. So there's a third layer called content fields. And these parts, title, auto route, and flow, are reusable parts. So you can create other types that reuse the same parts. So they are like pluggable bits of functionality. Here of this blog content type, we see the same parts. We see title, auto route. Here we see a different part called HTML body, and a list behavior. So a content part brings in a set of data, but also some behavior. So it basically turns your content type into something, well, depending on the parts that you attach. All right, so let's go back to the blog here. So here we have a content item of type blog post. And what we'll see here is the title part renders this title input. So as you can see, it's very modular. The permalink field comes from the auto route part. Markdown body comes from probably there's a markdown part or something. Yeah, so there's a markdown body part, which provides this input here. Subtitle, I think, is a field probably on the blog post. So if we look at, okay, so here we see the fields, and I think technically these fields are attached to this blog post. So this is like an implicit part that's based on the content type itself, and it's just more of a container to be able to add fields to it. So here we see the subtitle field, banner, image, tags, and category, which we see here as well, tags, category, banner, image. And speaking of category, this is done using a taxonomy field, as you can see here. And taxonomies are like categories, but it's hierarchical. So you can go multiple levels deep, and you can reuse that functionality for, well, more or less tagging your content in advanced ways, which can also allow you to filter content items by a given taxonomy term. So it's quite extensible and flexible, and it's rich in functionality like that. All right, so here we look at here we looked at blog. So this is a content item, but if we want to see all content items, we can go to content items, and then we see all of those items. And another feature of Orchard is the ability to customize this menu. So this is somehow configured somewhere that shows just content items of type blog. All right, so media library here. So this allows you to upload images and then use it in content items. Main menu is what is used on the front end. So if we go to the front end here, no, here like this is the main menu. Which brings me to the next topic. There's a, well, in Orchard, you have modules, but you also have themes. And themes are similar to modules, but they are specialized in the sense that they provide the Razor files or the Liquid files. Orchard supports Liquid as well to provide the front-end UI. So everything that you see here can be completely customized. And the way it works is you create a project or you use an existing theme, which is a NuGet package, and then you can customize it thanks to an advanced concept in Orchard called shapes. A shape basically being a view model combined with a template name. So if you render a shape, it has all of the metadata necessary to display itself, which is allows for very flexible, composable UI rendering in Orchard. I mentioned modularity, so let's take a look at the features. So in this configuration section called features, we see all of the features exposed to the system. And these features, they come from modules. And as I mentioned, a module is just a class library, and that module has a manifest, and the manifest is uh, a C# file that has some data or some attributes. Let's take a look in an example here. So here I have a custom module, so it's a good way to look at the manifest here of this module at least. So it uses assembly attributes to provide some metadata about this module. So this one is called Elsa workflows. So if we filter on Elsa workflows, this is the name of the category and then the features. And as you can see here in this manifest, I expose 3 features. One is like just the workflows feature. This is like the default or implicit feature of the module. And then there's a different feature called contents, which provides additional functionality to the system if this feature is enabled. And what's so powerful about the way these features work, let's talk a little bit about dependency injection, for example. So here I have features called content. Notice this startup class. This startup is not an ASP.NET Core startup class, but it's like a plug-in startup class. So you have the main startup class in your application, of course, or well, not the startup here, but in this case, just program. What Orchard will do, it will invoke each startup class of each enabled feature. So here you can see it's annotated with a feature attribute and the name of the feature. So this name matches the name in the manifest, which is this one here. And so if that feature is enabled through this UI here, so if I would enable this one, what happens is that this startup class will execute. So at that point, the shell will be restarted, and then each startup class will be invoked, registering the necessary services that are used here. So here, for example, a content type options provider is being registered, this content handler, etc. So very, very modular, very extensible in this way. Yeah, so that was an example of in this case, a custom feature through a custom module. But as you can see, there's many more features. There's a big list of features. There's deployment, development stuff for distributed hosting, Elsa workflows, which is my custom module, which we'll dig into a little bit deeper in a minute. OpenID, that's another quite powerful module that's provided out of the box. It uses OpenIDIct, which is an open source alternative to the popular Identity Server 4. But it's free, not like Identity Server 4, which is no longer 100% free, is my understanding. So this allows you to very easily and quickly set up an OpenID Connect identity server if you want to, as both as a server but also as a consumer. So it's just there just for free, which is pretty awesome. Let's see what else. Messaging, email. Microsoft Authentication is just one of the providers for this OpenID Connect feature I mentioned. AutoRoute, that's a feature that allows you to attach or make content items routable. So we looked at the one of the content items called, well, here we have a blog post with a permalink of this, and that allows you to to route to a content item. So as you can see here, this is the same URL, and this is the content item being displayed, and it's tagged with these tags. Navigation, OpenID Connect, we mentioned this one. Performance features, so you can make Orchard even faster just by enabling these features. Search, which uses Lucene, which is what Elasticsearch also uses. So if you use Elasticsearch under the internally, my understanding is that uses Lucene, but you can also use Lucene for .NET directly. Audit trail, course, all sorts of security stuff. Of course, users, it has roles and users that you can manage. So here, of course, we have the administrator and roles. And for each role, you can specify its permissions. So that's what it looks like here. So, and any module can contribute to the set of permissions that you can then assign to a given role. So a pretty big list, huh? Users, this looks like this. So very, very simple. You have username, email. This, by the way, comes from, at least last time I checked, comes from, say, content part called user part. So the user part provides this UI. I think this is the roles part, at least that used to be the case. It might have changed, but in principle, and I might be wrong, just as a disclaimer, it's been a while since I actually looked at it, but at some point, at least in Orchard 1, users were also content items. And that means you can extend with custom parts. But again, I don't know if that's still the case. I believe I remember at some point there was some discussion if it should remain a content item or not. We would have to look into the code to be sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is at least some way to extend a user with stuff like a profile. Theming is enabled. So this should mean we should be able to change the theme to something else. So let's see if I remember how. General settings, admin menus. Okay, so on the recipes, we can run existing recipes. These are not setup recipes, but these are recipes you can execute after you set up a tenant. And so here, there's an easy way to enable Elasticsearch query, whatever that means. And it seems like we currently only have one available, or maybe I think I'm confused. So this is the block theme that I enabled, which brings in these recipes, but this is not the way to change a theme. Figure out from where. Design. What about this one? Themes. All right, this is better. This is the current admin theme. And as far as I know, that's the only admin theme that exists today. For the front end, this is the current site theme. So they make a distinction between admin themes and site themes, which is for the front end like this. So here they have a different theme called the agency theme and the coming soon theme. And we should be able to just switch to it. So now if we go to the front end and refresh, nothing to see here. What do we see on the homepage? So clearly this theme wasn't designed for blog posts. As you can see, it's using some default rendering. It doesn't look too good. Let's try the agency theme. All right, so it has home and about, but as you can see, the parts, the fields, they aren't. The theme isn't designed for these content items. And the default theme here, very basic, home, and a little menu here to go back to the dashboard. Let's quickly change it back to, all right. So this one, of course, is designed for content types like blog post. But in any case, you can see it has a theming system. It's pretty cool. Well, it has much more. But let's take a look at their not yet Elsa workflows, but the built-in module. The workflows module. So that's this feature here. So we can choose from the workflows module itself, and then some options to enable timer workflows activities, session workflow activities, which is like I imagine activities to run database queries, and this one is about HTTP activities. So let's enable all of these. All right, so with this enabled, we now have a new menu item called workflows. We don't have any workflows yet, but let's try one. Let's do an HTTP hello, and let's see. So we have enabled. So that's actually a pretty good feature, which we don't have in Elsa. Although you could unpublish a workflow definition which is like disabling it. But maybe it's interesting to consider having an enabled disabled setting. Single instance, this is a concept we also have. In Elsa 3, it has more than just a single instance option. It also has an option to be like a singleton, but across correlation IDs. So you can have multiple instances of the same workflow as long as the correlation ID is different. That would be a different strategy. Here it's just a single instance, which translates to singleton in Elsa. Delete successfully completed workflows is similar to retention module in Elsa, but there you can't configure it from the UI, but here you can enable it straight from the workflow, which is pretty good. And then there are some advanced settings, which has to do with, I think, distributed hosting. So if you host Orchard Core in a multi-node environment and you run workflows, it will acquire a distributed lock, and here you can specify the lock timeout. All right, so let's save this one. And now we are looking at the designer. So what do we see is we see properties, which brings us back to this page where we can change the name and change the setting. So what I'm trying to do is create a workflow that implements a content approval workflow. And the idea is let's say when a contributor submits a new piece for the website, maybe through form, then the workflow should notify some approver, some user, and that user should, from the email, should be able to approve the content item or reject the content item. And depending on what link was clicked, it should resume the workflow and then either publish the content item or maybe send an email to the contributor to make some revisions, for example. We're not going to implement the whole thing, but just as a principle, I wanted to show the signaling, how it works in Orchard, because it's very similar to the way it works in Elsa 1 and 2. Yeah, so, but I didn't know the expression, so I was looking at the documentation. So I think the idea here is that approved would be the name of the signal, and this signal URL is a liquid filter that turns this, that generates an absolute URL, or maybe it's not absolute, it could be relative, and then you need to do absolute URL like this. And then it generates an absolute URL. I think maybe it's not necessary. Let's see what the documentation says. Yeah, I think that's it. So I think we need to use this one. So we have approve and checked. All right, so let's save this workflow and create a new blog post. Of course, if you were to provide or grant access to a contributor to the backend, which is a legitimate use case in Orchard because of its permission system, but then you would probably want to disable access to the publish feature of content items, which I think you can do in Orchard. But for now, we're going to pretend we don't have the publish button. We're just going to think that we only can save this as a draft. So let's do that. We should have a new email. And unfortunately, it doesn't show the body at all. Maybe I made an error. Maybe let's remove this one, because I think if it errors out, it will just not render anything. But this should be valid, almost valid. Well, maybe this is the issue, like this. Let's try this again. Still nothing, huh? Let's remove this. Approve signal. What happens if we remove this one? Let's see. I did notice that here. Oh no, it was including an escape character when I pasted it in, but I don't see it in the documentation, so it's not supposed to be escaped. Well, let's give it one more try. No, it doesn't want to display the URL.
And you
That's
just keep some
unfortunate.
text in the email without any URL. So
Like this.
yeah.
Isn't that something? Doesn't want to show the email body. Does the body contain HTML? I don't know. Could be a bug.
Does this
Let's.
mail client support HTML?
Oh, you think maybe this is doesn't?
There is no content. Nobody.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is. Maybe it means it's just time to switch to a proper workflow engine. So let's take a look at Elsa workflows next. So as I already mentioned, there's this, I'm working on a custom Orchard module called Elsa workflows. And The goal is to have it integrate nicely into Orchard. So when you look at Elsa 2 and 3, it has its own reusable web workflows designer, which also includes menu items to browse workflow definitions, for example. But when integrating in a dashboard or an application like Orchard, it makes more sense to integrate those UI things into the system itself. So here we have menu item called workflow definitions to manage workflow definitions. So let's create a new workflow. First, we are asked to create a name, which is the same way it works with the workflow built-in module. So when you create a new workflow, it asks you to provide a name and some settings. I kept it very simple for now, but this of course can be extended with additional settings like we have in the Elsa 3 designer, including advanced settings if we want to. But for now, we'll keep it simple. We'll say HTTP hello world. All right, so now this designer is quite different from the Elsa one. Of course, it has a different UI system for adding activities to the dashboard. So here you can drag and drop them onto the design service. We have activity settings right here. So it's very different as compared to the Orchard workflows designer. And then here we have workflow properties. So let's do the HTTP hello world. Or maybe what we should do is do the approval. Maybe that's better. So here we have content item created. If you've used Elsa, you haven't seen any content item created activities, of course, because that's very domain specific. In this case, specific to Orchard. And this is what I want to show is the integration between Elsa and Orchard through, well, Orchard Core's extensibility. So it has very similar concepts that we have in Elsa, and as a matter of fact, many concepts in Elsa have been adopted from Orchard Core. For example, we have a folder called content item created, which includes a content handler. So a content handler is like a notification handler or a mediator event, notification handler. Although Orchard Core doesn't use mediator library, it has its own implementation of a similar concept. And it allows you to handle a bunch of events. So for example, whenever content gets created, you can hook into that event and do some stuff, which is perfect for Elsa because it allows you, and for the Orchard Core Workflows module for that matter, it uses the same mechanism because it allows you to listen for that event when a content item is created and then trigger a workflow trigger. So in this case, I'm triggering a custom activity called content item created, which if we look at its implementation, this is a proper Elsa activity, Elsa 3. So it implements trigger and it returns the content item that was created. So when it executes, first it will see if it executes as a trigger, and if so, then it's going to continue and execute, which does nothing more than just getting the content item that it receives as an input, setting it as its result, and then completing itself. So that's very basic. But if it's used as a blocking activity, then it's gonna, what's gonna do here? Oh, then it's gonna create a bookmark for each of the selected content types, which I didn't show. Because the way this activity works, it allows you to select which content items you want to filter on. So maybe you don't want to listen for every content type, but just for blog post in this example. And then the output, you can capture the content item that was created in a variable. So here we have, there's a little issue here with the UI because of, well, first of all, because I'm not a front-end developer, and second of all, it's this height of this toolbar that needs to be taken into account. But let's say we have a created content item, a variable of type content item. So this shows the extensibility of Elsa itself, of course. And then we're not going to store it in the workflow because a content item could be, it is serializable, by the way, but it could also be a little bit big, and let's just keep it in memory. All right. And of course, let's not forget to mark this as a trigger and then capture the created content item here. And now we could do the same thing we wanted to do in the other workflow in Orchard. where we send an email, but for that we need to enable that feature. If we enter email, so Elsa Workflows also has an email feature which we enable. Now if we go back, then we see the send email activity. And this, by the way, this is the send email activity that comes from Elsa already. But because Orchard has its own SMTP service that can be configured from this configuration, it makes sense for this activity to use Orchard's SMTP service, and that's just to show um, how extensible and customizable Elsa is as well. If we look at the emails feature, if we look at its startup class, so the way it works is this startup class from Orchard configures Elsa, and then we tell Elsa to use, well, email functionality. So Elsa also has a concept of features, but it's not quite the same implementation as Orchard, but conceptually it's more or less the same. And it allows you to override the the factory that produces an ISMTP service that's necessary by the send email activity of Elsa. And here we're returning an wrapping SMTP service. So the wrapping SMTP service implements Elsa's ISMTP service, and internally it will resolve the SMTP service from Orchard. So then it's just gonna basically translate the my message to a mail message, which is what is used by Orchard Core, and then trying to reuse as much as possible from both Elsa in the case of the activity, and in the case of Orchard, the SMTP service. So here we're basically doing some mapping and then invoking the Orchard service. And this name is of course just an alias here because both Elsa and Orchard use the same ISMTP service name, but they're different types. Anyway, so let's connect these two. And then here's an email. We can say, well, we have similar fields, so we have all of these things. Here we can say, we can use JavaScript or Liquid, so that's cool. We could say, let's say, please review this new post. Then we could say get created content item. You see already it's getting better with the IntelliSense. And then we say display text. Right, so that's the subject, and then maybe also in the body. Let's publish this one. And now let's create a new post. Let's create post number 6. All right, so here. Okay, I think this comes from the other workflow. Let's disable the other workflow here. Content approval, disable. Mohammed, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, okay.
That
Yeah,
was the old
okay.
message.
Okay, okay. Thanks. Let's see, did this work? So this is published. Let's see, because I didn't see the email coming in. Maybe, I wonder, maybe the SMTP service isn't, well, it is clearly running, so that's not it. Can start workflow, blog post. Let me just do one quick check in the database. At this point, the Orchard workflows works better because at least you get an email. And with Elsa, you don't even get an email. Orchard Core Elsa, just to check if we have the trigger at least. Yeah, so at least we have this trigger. So something else seems to be amiss. Let's see if at least the send email activity runs. Okay, just try and create a new content item. Okay, so at least the trigger is being invoked. Okay, and then here, what do we see? Oh, I remember this one. So this fails because the send email activity isn't aware of the SMTP settings configured in Orchard. So from is not set, so it's just failing. So quick workaround, of course, is providing a from value explicitly. So let's just do that. Let's give it another go with post 9. This one works. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay, so it should have sent something, but did it? I shouldn't have pressed the, let's try again.
Is the to address set?
Yeah, something like that. Something must be off. Let's go into here and also, so we have the wrapped SMTP service. Let's see if we can find its options. or 2525. That's okay. Default sender network is good. Doesn't seem to work anymore.
How about the two field? You updated the from field. How about the two field?
Good question. To is empty. Yeah, genius. Let's also provide a two fields.
We need validation.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's gonna save a lot of time. All right, let's try it again with post 11. Yeah, by the way, in Blazor, there's built-in validation in the controls, which is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
There we go. And as you can see, this one works. This is probably because we didn't set the body to JavaScript. Let's change this to Java. Let's change that to JavaScript like this. Creating another post, and then this all works. And of course, I wanted to show the signal URL. In Elsa 3, we don't have signal URL yet, but that has to be added. What we do have is things like events. So we could listen for an event of a given name, but there's currently no way to conveniently generate some public URL that then triggers the event, which we do have in Elsa 2 in the form of signal received and a JavaScript function and a liquid filter to generate a signal URL. And that is something we also have in Orchard, but that's currently lacking in Elsa 3. Out of the box, at least. You can always implement it through its extensibility, but it would be good to have it out of the box as well. And then you can imagine waiting for approved and rejected. And then depending on that, you would have another activity that's called something like publish content item, which you then add to the workflow and provided the created content item as an input, which would then get published. So yeah, that's all I wanted to show for now on Orchard Core. For those who haven't seen it, I think it's interesting to at least have have seen a glimpse of it, because it's as I mentioned, it's where Elsa originated from.
Yeah, it's very interesting, really. And I'm just wondering this ability for the feature toggling, as you have shown that you can enable the email and activities, for example. Is this something that we can do in Elsa as well?
Potentially, yes, but in terms of doing it from the UI, let's talk. It is something I want to be able to do as well from the UI, but it would require some some additional work for sure. For example, the way it works in Orchard, it has this feature called shells, and a shell it's like its own. It contains its own dependency or its service container, so it's pretty advanced, and we would probably need something like that in Elsa 3 as well, or if not Elsa 3, in the dashboard application itself, but of course also on the server, because here in Orchard, the UI served from the same application as well as the workflow server, but in Elsa 3, typically you will have a separate server on the on the back end, and then you have maybe a separate application that is the Blazor dashboard, for example. And it would be so cool to be able to have this list of features that you can switch on and off and configure. But we need to think of a good architecture there. But that's going to happen.
If you could do it for this module, I mean, I think logically it should be also doable to Elsa itself. I'm not sure, but it's very interesting concept, because I could imagine, for example, an administrator UI. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah. So, for example, an admin UI where you want to enable or disable certain features, or even if you have a marketplace later on and you want to just download some activities and import them into the system. So this could be a really core capability to also consider in Elsa itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to work on that
Yeah.
pretty soon after the else the well the dashboard project
Mm.
is releasable. Then I think one of the next features would be multi-tenancy in combination with features.
And,
Did you
mm,
see the Elsa Studio by any chance?
the Mud Blazer based, right?
Right. Yes.
I think I saw in one of the previous meetings, but I have not seen the latest progress on that yet.
Let me, if you have a few minutes, I can show you the
Yeah, sure.
current
Mm.
state.
Okay. And I'm just interested to know from Orchard Core, what was the motivation to have a workflow module in the first place? Because as a content management system, workflow is maybe not a very core functionality to have. But
Sorry,
what
can
was
you
the,
repeat the question? I didn't catch it.
yeah, I'm just saying for Orchard itself to have a workflow module, what was the main motivation? Just wondering, because content management and workflow sometimes maybe not strongly linked together.
Sure. So as it turns out, it's actually a quite powerful module to have,
Mm-hmm.
arguably the most powerful feature to have in Orchard or any CMS, because it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to implement many scenarios. For example, content approval workflows where you don't want to automatically accept content contributions, but you want to have people review it and then approve it. That's one example.
Mm-hmm.
Another example could be what Orchard allows you to create custom forms. So you can present those forms on the website, and
Uh-huh.
then when somebody submits the form, you want to process the data, maybe send an email, turn it into a content item, and uh, turn it
Mm-hmm.
into an order, depending on what functionality you're implementing. What else? Let's take a look at the some of the events. Well, the HTTP thing allows you to expose an endpoint that you can programmatically invoke and then maybe perform tasks like what we have here, assign a user to a role. This would be, by the way, useful if you expose a, let's say, a form on your website again, and you want to maybe implement a registration form to allow users to sign up with your website. You expose a form with a username and a password field and an email field maybe. When it's submitted, you create an actual user and assign it to a guest role, for example. So that's another uh, example. What else could be useful? Updating content. So those are just two examples that come to my mind. I'm sure there's many other use cases that people have used to in Orchard itself. And I think workflows within a system like Orchard or other content management systems, and probably even more so in dashboard applications that revolve around certain domains. Of course, here we are talking about Orchard with basic content management systems, but Orchard is also used in by organizations that extend the system with domain-specific entities like maybe customer management or document management. So there will be more business-specific processes that you can then implement using this workflows module.
And for example, maybe I'm not sure, but if you make a post, you want to send an email to the subscribers
Mm,
or
exactly. Yeah,
publish to social media. So yeah, it would be
there you go.
interesting if that is what you do in our. That is really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you have used Elsa workflows in your projects. So
Mm,
those scenarios probably could also translate into Orchard Core if you were using Orchard Core to implement
yeah,
parts
yeah,
of your application.
yeah. I think forms is very common, and we have used forms concept with Elsa workflows. So yeah, that I can correlate with as well.
I'm trying to start the studio, but it's using a port that's already in use. Yeah, still, huh? This one stopped. This one, everything stopped. Oh, connection refused. It's trying to connect to, of course. Let me start this one first. Apparently there's some fireworks going on. I didn't know it was that time of the year again. All right, so here we have the dashboard. This is Elsa
Oh,
Studio. It's built in Blazor, and it works both
mm,
using Blazor Server as well as Blazor WebAssembly. And the way I probably already explained this the last time you attended
yeah,
this thing, right? Okay,
yes.
yeah. So I will not go over that, but I will show you the progress. Of course, dark mode, light mode is still there. A new feature to be implemented is environments. So this allows you to switch between the a registered environment that you want to work on. So it could be your local
Mm,
environment, staging, production. If you want to be brave and make fixes directly in production if you want to.
okay.
And depending on the selection, the contents would be loaded from that environment. So this basically
Okay.
translates to an Elsa API endpoint or Elsa HTTP server
Mm, mm,
URL, right? So it would fetch the information from there. So we have
that's nice.
definitions. Oh,
Mm,
instances doesn't work yet. This is here we have a few more menus just to scaffold some of the upcoming modules like webhooks and secrets, users and roles management, so that you
mm,
can, manage users of the system and roles and permissions, secrets and webhooks. It's all just stopped out, so it's not really implemented. This is a demo module, and of course, under settings, there could be a thing called features, like in Orchard, so that you can indeed enable, disable, and configure settings or features. Here we have the designer. Whoa, this looks ugly. Let me try again. Okay, something is not right here. I fixed this, but let me quickly switch to light mode, which is a little bit easier on the eye in terms of the grid. So what's really cool about this is that this designer, this area, this is X6, so it uses JS interrupt, of course, as is the, also for this drag and drop. But these activities, they are actually rendered using Blazor. So we have,
oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah, seriously. So so actually also this toolbar, this thing here, the breadcrumbs, these things here, this is all Blazor. It's not implemented yet. It's just mostly UI scaffolds. Also for this picker, this is also Blazor using mud Blazor components. The way this works is with Blazor components, you can register them as custom elements so that you can use them in JavaScript. So when I configure this design service using X6, I have a custom, what is it called? Custom shape, I think is what they call it. And then then I'm using their HTML shape. And in the HTML, I'm creating markup that uses a custom element called, I think, Elsa activity or something. And then it just renders it. It just works.
Oh,
So
that's really interesting.
yeah, and you can already see where this might be going. Now it
Mm,
becomes so much easier to customize the UI of your activities. You could do it also in stencil, but then you would have to create a stencil component. But now you can use Razor components to customize the activities, provide custom activities with custom UI, both on the designer, of course, also in the input. It would be easier to add custom input controls, you implement cascading UI if you need to, etc. Yeah, that's the current status.
does it
The-
support if I have a material UI theme,
yeah.
I want to change the colors or?
Oh, so MudBlazer implements Material
Mhm.
UI, and this dashboard is not set up to allow you to do something completely different. It actually tightly integrated MudBlazer. Of course, MudBlazer itself has theming in terms of colors, so you can
Mm,
change the colors and certain other aspects, but you are stuck with material design. It's not like Orchard
yeah,
where you have complete freedom in terms of theming.
yeah.
Which
Yeah, for us, it is fine to be stuck with material. That is, we are trying to implement material for our interface. So I just want, because right now the way we embed it is just we put the designer inside the UI. It is not really matching.
mm,
So if this is implementing material, we are also trying to implement material. I'm just wondering if we can merge together and have the same theme somehow.
yeah, I see. Yeah. yeah, it would be really good to have maybe complete customizability in terms of theming,
Mm,
but it's
mm,
also a lot more work, right? The main point
yeah,
of using MudBlazer is to be able to use an existing component library to quickly build out the UI,
exactly. Yeah.
and of course to allow
Mm,
developers to reuse those components and even add more
mm,
components, taking those components from that library and leverage in their custom modules. Also, it has tabbed UI, so you can quickly
oh.
switch between. Well, not too quickly. If you do too quickly, you get this error.
Yeah, reasonably quickly.
Yeah, exactly. But still, it's quicker than having to go to the workflow
Yeah.
definition browser and then clicking. And obviously, this error will be fixed at some point.
Yes. No, that's really
Yeah,
exciting. Yeah. It's really
right.
impressive.
Yeah, it's cool, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to continue with this for the past week. So it's there's no
Mm,
progress yet.
mhm,
31st, so next Wednesday, I have the Orchard talk. After that, I
yeah.
expect to be able to continue with this dashboard. All right. Well, thank you for joining, Mohammed. I
Yeah.
wish you a good night.
Yeah. You too. Have a good night.
Thank you, and I'll catch you next week. Bye bye.